Welcome to the RIA Match webinar, How to Begin a Dialogue with Prospective Matches. I'm Mary Ann Buchanan, founder and CEO of RIA Match. This is a rebroadcasting of How to Begin a Dialogue, so we won't be taking any questions today. I'd like to share with you, though, the results of the registration questions answered for the original webinar. We'd like to know what type of firms and people are registering and participating in our webinars. For this webinar, 15% of the registrars were early solo practices, 27% mature solo practices, 24% were early ensemble firms, 19% mature ensemble firms, and 15% market dominators. Of that pool, 54% had added advisors to their practices, and 29% had completed a merger or acquisition. I find these numbers interesting as more than half of those who attended had completed negotiations with a potential partner, and they have experience with the successes and challenges of inorganic growth. We trust you will gain valuable information for your future negotiations today. Before we begin, we would like you to print out the worksheet we are going to be reviewing. It can be found in the RIA Match Store. The free worksheet is called the Partnership Resource Initial Discussion Worksheet. There are two sections to the worksheet. There's a blank worksheet and a sample worksheet that's completed. So we're going to be looking at both of those today. So once you print it out, so do the sample and the blank ones side by side because we go back and forth. So very briefly, let me introduce you to RIA Match. RIA Match is a website that offers financial advisors solutions for succession planning and growth. The website matches financial advisors with other financial advisors and RIAs who want to buy, sell, merge, or join practices. The advisors and RIAs can search for free and pay to connect anonymously and securely on our site. We're independently owned. RIA Match's mission is to create an efficient market for advisors and RIAs to partner their practices. The site is agnostic as to custodial platform. We created the playing field. We don't call the plays, and we do not benefit from them. It's a pure approach designed to serve all advisors, regardless of scale, scope, or experience. Success on RIA Match is making connections that will lead to potential partnerships or new firms to join. Our goal is to bring advisors the most efficient tools and excellent information so you can make the best decisions for the succession and growth of your firm. Recently, we celebrated our first year of service to the community. We have over 1,280 registered profiles on our site, and those profiles have sent over 8,000 communications between them. So let's get started. Whether you meet someone on RIA Match or at a conference or through another advisor, it's important to have the tools to represent your firm and your interests during negotiations. It's important to have the tools to discover what the other party's true interests are and assess the viability of a good fit. How do you begin this dialogue? Well, this is what we're going to discuss today. We will cover how to prepare for the most efficient, effective discussion with potential matches, how to provide structure to fully explore the match. We will uncover objective means to refine and compare the quality of the matches. I'd like to welcome Lizette Smith and Tanya Rapaz, co-founders of the Partnership Resource. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your experiences and expertise with us. It will be a great benefit for our advisor community. Lizette and Tanya are going to discuss how to approach negotiation preparation. They will guide us through a case study from one of their clients. And then we will focus on our own worksheets that you printed out, and we'll begin to work with the negotiation prep tools ourselves. Lizette and Tanya were formerly partners in a wealth management firm that merged. Then they subsequently sold their interests. They studied conflict resolution and negotiation at the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School and UMass Boston's Conflict Studies graduate program. They launched the Partnership Resource in 2012 to focus on conflict resolution for business partners, many of whom are investment advisors. So we did run some polling during our original broadcast, and I wanted to share with you a little bit of the polling. Our first question that we had asked was, how long does a typical transaction take to complete? Is it 4 to 6 months, 9 to 12 months, or more than 12 months? So as you listen to the broadcast and think about what your answer might be, Lizette, thank you for coming today. What is your estimate on the time it takes to complete a transaction?
Thank you for having us, Marianne.
Our pleasure.
The answer is about 9 to 12 months, and that was actually in a Mark Hurley study that was released earlier this year. And, you know, we just feel like it's really important to kind of start out with that, because it's really a lot of time and resources that get invested in these transactions. And so if for some reason they don't get completed, or if the fail during the implementation phase, it's really a lot of lost value.
Right, right. So, Lizette, walk us through the partnership resources approach to mediation and how it helps advisors contemplating a merger or succession.
So really what we are looking to do by using this negotiation approach is to increase the chance that succession plans and mergers will actually be implemented and completed successfully. So what the structure we're going to talk about is a 7-element negotiation structure that prepares you for the discussions to assess the potential matches that you identify on RIA Match in a really specific process. So, I mean, our overall approach is that you know your business better than anyone, and we provide the guidance to help you work through the issues in a really constructive way, both the business and the relationship issues. Mm-hmm. But it's really your deal, and you need to kind of have ownership of how it's going to turn out so that it's more likely to succeed.
Very good, very good. Tanya, hello.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi. Can you take us through the case study?
Sure, and this case study is based on a composite of a couple of different situations that we were involved in, and it is simple for the purposes of this webinar, but I think it is pretty typical, a pretty true-to-life example. In this case, two partners have been in business together for 22 years. They're both thinking about retirement. They have a successful practice. Built the way many of us built our practices, with referrals over time. And of course that leads to them feeling personally connected to and responsible for their clients. And in this case, then this is frequently the reason that people enter into the sales discussion, is that the partners want to retire. One wants to retire, travel, spend time in the sun with their spouse, but the other is kind of looking at more of a forced retirement because of health issues. So that is sort of the impetus that's driving them. Some of the other facts is that they have a key staff person, somebody who has been very involved with the clients, very well loved, knows them all, high touch, and they would like that person taken care of in some way in the transition. So when they're looking at why they're doing this, there are some concrete financial objectives that they would like to meet in the terms of having a secure retirement and recognizing the value of their practice. But they also have some intangibles that they would like to see the staff and their clients taken care of in the future.
Right, right.
So that's, you can kind of imagine that situation. So in our case here, now that the two partners have gotten together and started to write out what, if they are going to sell their firm, what are they looking for in a buyer?
Right, right. So that's
yes, that's where the worksheet comes in. So if anybody has their worksheet out with them, that would be helpful to follow along.
That's the sample one that's filled in, is about this case study. Okay, great.
Right. Right. So the example on the RIA Match website follows along with this webinar.
Very good. Lizette, let's start at the top of the worksheet. What is the objections section of the worksheet? Walk us through that.
So really, we just have you start with a broad objective. So if succession is the long-term goal, you may be looking to bring someone in, but you may find that merging with a similar firm is also a possible fit. So this is really your overall goal, and once you start getting in your prospects, you can say, what's my goal for this overall prospect? How do I want to work through our discussions? And you may need more information before really determining what the best fit would be, but this is kind of a big picture look at, why are you engaging in a conversation with this person? So you want to be as specific as you can be, but it's really an opening.
Okay, very good, sort of broad picture.
Exactly.
So here's our sample. What are we looking at here?
Right. So in this case study, the person's just filling it out saying, we want a buyer for our firm, and then giving some broad look at kind of the wish list of the type of buyer that they think would fit their client. So here the ideal firm would have young principals, similar investment and financial planning philosophy, high client service orientation, no compliance issues, and a similar fee structure, which is a really great place to start, and it will likely get reality tested as you go through the process. But we, start with what the wish list and then kind of drill down on those as the worksheet progresses.
Very good, very good. The example is very helpful. It makes us able to think about it more concretely. Our second polling question in the original broadcast was this. According to research, which approach to negotiation leads to the best results? Accommodating, where you agree to as many items as possible in order to maintain the relationship. Demanding, where you refuse to back down or compromise on any substantive position. Or collaborating, which is viewing the other party as a partner against a common problem. Tanya, what are the findings in the research?
Good question. So in the research, and this is reported by the partners at NeuroAwareness, which is a research think tank that looks at how brain chemistry relates to conflict resolution, collaborating is the correct answer. And if I remember when we did this webinar live, almost everyone in the audience knew the answer. So that was, I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea that seeing the counterparty as a collaborator is going to lead to a better deal that you can, when you're working together, you can come up with an agreement that is not only more likely to be completed, but you're more likely to be satisfied with when the transaction is completed.
Very good. And that makes sense. So Tanya, given those results, what do people need to be thinking about as they fill out the interest section of the worksheet?
Right. This is one of the most important parts of the worksheet. This is where you start to take a look at what you really want to get out of this transaction. And it's very helpful when you are thinking about what you want to get out of the transaction that you think as broadly as possible. And in negotiation terms, there are two things that people, how people answer that question. And one is the position, which is what you want, and the interest, which is why you want it. And and this is based on the research that is out of Harvard, that if you take the position, you're sort of cementing yourself into that position, and it's harder to make concessions. But if you think about it in terms of why you want what you want, there could actually be several options out there that satisfy what you want. And one example that I can think of to help sort of illustrate the difference between an interest and a position, and this will probably resonate with the investment advisors who have clients. If a client comes to you and says, I want to get a 10% return on the market, that's a position. And it might be hard to work with that client if that's what if that's the only stated goal that the relationship has. So you'll need to dig a little bit deeper and find out why they want that or why they think they want that, and uncover that they are looking to either retire at a certain age, at a certain lifestyle. They're looking for security. So it's having people really look at what will really meet their needs in a broad way, because there could be many ways that you could satisfy that, and that is a great way to start looking at options that will likely lead to an agreement that both parties will be happy with.
Very good. That does help. And here's the case study.
Right. So in the phone call, I'm imagining you're having an initial phone call with the other party. You've kind of written down your interests, and now you're trying to pull out what are their interests. And here you kind of have to put on the active listening hat, which I'm sure everyone uses with their clients all the time. Listening to what they say, and when you're talking about your motivations, listening for their motivations also. So the other thing that you're doing at this time is thinking about, what you want to get out of the sale, but what do they want to get out of the purchase? You're taking their perspective. You're looking at the transaction from their point of view. So we've, kind of wrote down here that you want to capture the value of your management firm and, minimize the taxes, all the financial issues people keep top of mind, and then also those intangible issues we already talked about. But, what does the buyer want? They want a firm with a higher profile. They want to, increase their assets under management at a relatively low cost. Both you and they probably want to retain the clients for a longer term. So you can start to paint a picture of whether what they have as their interests match up with your interests, and then make a note of where they don't match up and see how you might be able to negotiate that as the deal progresses.
Very good. Very good. So moving on to the next section, Lizette, how do you generate options that address the interests of both parties?
Well, sometimes, options start to get generated even as you're discussing interests. And the approach we're, encouraging people to use here is kind of a brainstorming approach. Basically, thinking, now that you've discussed your interests, thinking about how you might work together to meet those. Again, kind of staying at a broad level. So we don't want you to start evaluating them at once, but just gathering ideas that you can kind of categorize more later. One of the things that's interesting about this approach is that you have the opportunity to be creative, and do this based on the match that's in front of you, to not have the same conversation with each person, but to bring different options of how things might work depending on, how you've explored that. So we really encourage people to be to be creative and to work with it, not so much thinking of it in terms of a operating agreement, but just, how do we want things to look?
Right, right. And so the case study.
Right. So here we talk a little bit about, what has to happen so that our interests can be met. And one of the things they're talking about doing is getting more details on the investment implementation. So if they've said broadly what their investment approach is, but, one of the options to get a better idea if their interests are aligned is to get more details on investment implementation. And also, as far as financing, to structure a deal that might include some payments over time or seek outside financing, issue a joint press release kind of as part of, showing a united front, and then having partners and key staff stay and assist with the transition, and hiring that employee to aid in client retention. And then also, if they have an interest in a retention bonus. So those are all things they might think about to meet the interests that they've discussed.
Very good. Tanya, why is this level of communication so important? So our next section of the worksheet is communication.
Right, it is extremely important. And before you embark on that initial conversation with the other party, you should be thinking about all the things that you want to convey to that party, and then what information would you want to gather, and then how you want that information to be conveyed. And that's why the worksheet is sort of oriented in the two columns. So you think about what information that you want to, collect and receive. And communication is going to be the basis of the negotiation. And really the early conversations that you have with the other person are or where you're modeling how you would work together in putting together the deal, and then how you would work together kind of even after the deal is signed, and if you have any kind of ongoing consulting arrangement with the partners, and when you go to see all the clients, and this is the basis on which all your future relationship will hinge. So that is why it's so important, and that's why we bring up again the active listening for what they're communicating to you, what's being said and what's not being said. And for the parties here, the partners, there is a little bit of an art to it. As we described, and this will be in the case in almost every transaction, there might be some information that is pertinent to the deal, but you might not want to disclose right away. So you'll have to think about that in this case, with one of the partners being ill and needing to execute. You might want to hold that back until you've formed a little bit more trust. But that is one of the benefits of going through this process of disclosing information and getting information back from the other side, because it does build trust that you will need to have a successful transaction.
Very good.
One technique that you can use, sorry, Mary, if you were going to say something.
No, I was just moving on.
As you were asking the questions about, with the custody issues or the fee and philosophy issues, to restate what you're hearing the other party say. And that really has two benefits, because it makes sure that you are actually, in fact, understanding what they're saying, and it makes the other party feel heard, which again builds that trust and that good communication that you will need as you go forward.
Very good, very good. And I've got the sample slide up. Is there anything else we needed to cover on that?
Well, I guess the other thing, you see that there, when you get the answers to the questions of what you want to know, there may be some answers that you don't like, which will lead to sort of the conflict part that inevitably comes up in any negotiation. When you're not going to be able to agree on everything, but if you have the right kind of a communication where you have already built trust over small issues, this will form the base so you can address those contentious issues without necessarily sacrificing the relationship if it turns out that this is the right match for you.
Very good. That's very helpful. I want to take a break here to talk about what our final polling question was in the original broadcast. So according to Professor Margaret Heffernan, as stated in her 2012 TED Talk, what percentage of European and American executives know about a business problem at their company that they are not bringing up because of the conflict they believe it would cause? So is that percentage 25%, 45%, 65%, or 85%? So what percentage of executives know about a business problem at their company, but they are not willing to bring it up because of the conflict it would cause? Lizette, what was the correct answer on that?
Well, her research indicated that it was 85% of people, that avoid bringing up issues because they don't want to deal with the conflict. And so, obviously, as people involved in conflict resolution, that's interesting to us, and also just an indication of, how much more productive maybe we could be if we had some confidence that we can bring up contentious issues in a way that's constructive. And so that, there are a lot of implications of that. And sometimes avoiding things isn't always bad. Sometimes things really do blow over, but more often they, grow and fester.
Yeah, and
so go ahead.
That really speaks to the fact that we need conflict resolution skills. We either need to develop them ourselves or bring someone on that can help, because that's conflict avoidance seems to be inherent in a lot of people.
Right, and it gets to be a bit, a waste of time, because just because people aren't bringing it up to the people who can actually do something about it, that doesn't mean they're not, wasting time and resources worrying about it or venting about it in a non-productive way.
Right, right. Let's move on to the relationship factor. Lizette, how does relationship factor into the discussion?
Well, the way we're looking at it here is really, obviously we think it's a very critical issue in succession and mergers, more than some of the business aspects we look at. And what we're looking at here is just kind of the most basic type of relationship that you envision. And if you're looking to merge, we have other tools to really look more deeply at this. But even for people who are looking at a succession planning, you're going to have a relationship over some period. And so what we're looking at here is what expectations do you have for that relationship, and trying to get people to maybe separate their behaviors from underlying value issues, and again, to kind of stay big picture. So what kind of relationship are you seeking, and how much interaction do you perceive having with, if it's a succession plan, as you continue.
Right, but some of those succession plans, in order for them to be successful, there's got to be some overlap.
Right, and that is where it gets very, very tricky. That a founder who has built this business, to where it is now, to where it's very appealing, has to take really a secondary role, because the newer people are the future and need to, build that trust with the clients. And it's in both their interests to have that client retention, but that crossover period is, really ripe for conflict.
Yeah, challenging, inherently challenging. So here's the case study.
Right. So here, in this case, they're looking for a relationship that's cordial, and they want ongoing referrals. And frankly, I don't think this may be fairly common, that the people, coming in as successors aren't given a lot of thought to what relationship they're going to have with the founder. Whereas for the founder, it's, a little more, a little deeper, that, they want this workable, amiable relationship, and they know it's going to be short term, but they really need to have enough to feel good about the transaction. They need to know that their clients are in good hands, and they want to, do everything they can to make sure that that goes smoothly. So to them, it may have greater meaning.
Great. Absolutely. I think it's looking through two different filters on the same transaction.
Definitely.
So, Tanya, what are the objective standards, and why are they important?
So in any negotiation, it can be very helpful for the parties if there is a way that they could agree on what standards would be fair and objective before you start talking about the numbers and how big the deal will be. Objective standards are basically picking something that you both agree on would be a fair way to look at the transaction. And it gives legitimacy to the deal, and it could prevent the cycle of positional bargaining, which we all think of when we think about negotiation. I'll give you this, that, and hoping that you'll meet somewhere on the middle. But if you can focus early on the criteria and what the basis for it is, there's a better chance that you will come to an agreement, which is one of the things that we're working for with this discussion worksheet.
Right. So just sort of help me understand this. So if I were looking as a buyer to buy, and the person the firm I'm speaking with is the seller, that we actually agree on the methodology of firm valuation?
Right. So you could agree whether you're going to be using a multiple of revenue, or whether you're going to use something that's a little bit more sophisticated, getting a third-party appraiser. Oh yeah, right here, this and some of the ideas that they would have for their valuation method.
Right.
So kind of even before you talk about what exactly your revenue is, I mean, I know that with listings that you might already have some idea, but if you both agree, on to get a third-party appraisal or who would do that appraisal, then you both will come to the table feeling that the negotiations are starting out on a more fair footing. Right.
And that's sort of the, how will we approach it if it's multiple of revenue or discounted cash flow, if they both agree on the way to go about it first. Yeah, I can see that. Yep, that's very good. So, Oh, sorry, Tanya, do you want to say something else?
I mean, this could be an area that is contentious because the seller might feel as though they are, due a certain amount, and the buyer may have a different approach. But this is just one of the ways that it'll contribute to the entire deal having more legitimacy.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to having a number, if I'm a seller and I've got a number in my head and I want to back into that number with whichever method will get me to that number.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So even in this example, the way it's filled out is a little positional because they're kind of stating what their multiple would be, and we would encourage people to maybe just say, even if that is the number you have in your head,
right.
to have an open mind about, to say it more in terms of, I would like to look at a multiple of revenue and, comparable sales, and then, see how it plays out.
Right, right. So for advisors that are engaging in this process, Lizette, how are they looking at alternatives other than sticking with the status quo?
Right. So, I mean, your, negotiating position in a lot of ways is only as good as your alternatives. And so in negotiation terms, the alternative is referred to as your BATNA, your best alternative to the negotiated agreement.
Okay.
So are there other prospective matches that are more attractive? So we're kind of envisioning, you use this sheet for, your 3 top people for their, those initial discussions. And then you can start to look at them and also, just what will you do if this doesn't work out? And for a lot of people, the answer is that we'll continue. We'll just continue as is. Actually, I guess, if we look at the case example,
okay,
that's one of the things
that just continue as is. Yeah.
Yes, that we're giving as, this is what we'll do. We'll continue as is, and we really, try to discourage people from having that as their BATNA, because there's just so much energy, as we said at the beginning. There's really a lot of energy needed to look for a buyer and to do the analysis you need to do while you're in practice, serving your clients, staying up on everything that you need to be current and be expert in your field. In addition to practice management, growing your practice, managing staff. So to add this on top for a prolonged period, and I think that's what people are finding now, can end up diminishing the value of your practice.
Right.
And honestly, if you keep putting it off, one of the things that people look at when they're buying a practice is the demographics of the clients, and it does make a big difference whether your client's average age is 50 or 55, as far as its value in the marketplace. So, if you and we do see people where they start succession planning and then it just gets to be kind of this rolling 5-year period of when they're going to retire that extends 10 years, and that really can make a difference in the value of the firm. Right.
Now, if I were looking at my succession choices, and I get to this alternative section, should I be? So in an ideal world, should I be talking to 2 parties at the same time or 3? What's a good number? And truly, I think if I had a couple of firms that I was talking to at the same time, I think that instinctively I'd be a little bit more scientific about it or objective. What do you think?
You mean the fewer that you have to look at?
So if I was only speaking to one other firm, and I'm doing this discussion, this worksheet, and this whole dialogue with one firm, I feel like I might feel as a seller, I've got to make this work. I'm 65 years old, I've got to make this work. But if I'm talking to, I've got sort of 1 on the front burner, 2 on the back burner, or I'm at different stages of discussion with other ones, so that helps what are my alternatives look brighter. So is there a sort of and can you comment on that? Is there, and the point that you made, which has been written about, is the amount of time it takes to look for a successor, to look for merger partners, does take it's a zero sum. If you're doing that, you're not doing other things for the firm.
Right, and you do see people that bring in someone with all good intentions, and it doesn't work out. And again, and then they start anew a year later.
Right.
But getting to your question about alternatives, I think what's interesting about this worksheet is that it's useful in a lot of ways. I mean, you can make out of it. The important thing is to kind of be looking at things from your perspective and the other parties, but depending on where you are, if really this is the only person, the only firm you're looking at, and you're focused on this negotiation, you will spend a lot more time on options and, how can this work, and
right.
that kind of thing. And if you're in the initial stages with maybe 3 or 4 that you're just not sure, and you just want to get some really basics down to get to know them better, then you will get at a level where you feel like you can at least start to weed out some people that, because of the way they've answered things or the way it's gone, you just don't think it will be a good fit, or it'll be a more difficult road.
Right. And I've heard from other mergers that to really not focus as much on the deal mechanics or deal structure, because you have to really have the trust in the relationship and the belief that both firms want the best for each other, and that is an easier point of departure.
Right. We feel like people are, starting to get that message. I think there's been enough, possibly, things that didn't go well, that looked so good on paper, that, haven't gone well, that people are getting the message that you have to do some work on the relationship. You really have to, not just, some of it can be casual stuff and getting to know each other, but, also just drilling down on how you're going to work together, and, and the trust elements that, usually take some time, and sometimes you need to put that on fast forward and get to build that sooner rather than later.
Right, right. Very good point. Well, I think that you both have given us a lot to think about as advisors enter into new transaction discussions. Tanya, what can people do if they have more questions?
All right, well, we have a website. It's thepartnershipresource.com, or send us an email or give us a phone call. And also in the RIA Match Store, we're making the worksheet and the sample available to RIA Match members. So if you feel like you can do it yourself, you definitely can download that worksheet and use it as many times as you'd like. But for some people who maybe would like to have some professional help in sorting through some of these issues of negotiation, we're also offering a discounted mini engagement, also available in the RIA Match Store.
And thank you very much for that. I think it's a tremendous tool to provide to advisors and firms. It's just awesome. I'd like to thank Lizette Smith and Tanya Rapaz, co-founders of the Partnership Resource. This has been very informative and very valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marian.
And just to sort of echo what Tanya said, we encourage you to visit the RIA Match Store, where we have many solutions on today's topics provided by the Partnership Resource. So please feel free to take a look. Thank you to our audience for taking the time to join us today to learn how to begin a dialogue with prospective matches. We wish you continued success. Good afternoon.